Hey everybody, welcome back to the Consumer Warrior Podcast. This is the podcast that's dedicated to helping you with your big debt problems. If you're just dabbling in debt, this isn't the podcast for you. We deal with the big problems like repossession, debt collection lawsuits, foreclosure, bankruptcy, and all the other horrible things that are out there. We're here to help you to help yourself. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, John Skiba, and on today's episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about Christmas and credit card debt. I'm recording this episode 1 week before the big day, before Christmas Day, and so I thought it might be a good opportunity to share some of the principles and ideas and laws behind using your credit cards if you're in financial difficulty and may need to file bankruptcy down the road. I'm going to be maybe a little bit of a Debbie Downer in this episode. But before I get to that question, I want to say that this episode of the podcast is sponsored by the Consumer Warrior Project. This is the platform that I put together to help consumers who are dealing with overwhelming debt problems, and particularly the legal issues that surround dealing with those debt problems. Whether it's a debt collection lawsuit, whether it's debt settlement, whether it's bankruptcy, I put together some templates and some forms and even video tutorials where I walk you step by step through the different processes on how you can help yourself to deal with those problems. You can access all of these programs and the forms and templates and everything over at legal.coach. That's the actual website address, www.legal.coach. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. Go over there and check those out and see if those could be of assistance to you as you work through your debt problems. All right, so let's talk about the holidays and credit card debt. Now, during the holiday season, obviously that's when a lot of people do a lot of spending. I fully am aware of the desire and the need to, particularly if you have children, to help people in the holiday season. I have 6 kids myself, and my wife and I know the financial pressures that can come around the holiday season. And what I wanted to bring up today is to give you some guidance as it relates to credit card use, particularly if you're thinking that maybe you're going to need to file for bankruptcy in the new year, because it can help you to avoid some problems. And that is, the Bankruptcy Code says that if you, prior to the filing of your bankruptcy, use your credit cards, there could be an opportunity for the credit card company to come in and raise an objection to those specific charges going away. And here's what the specific rule says. The rule says that if you buy luxury goods, and that's what the code says, the Bankruptcy Code says, if you buy luxury goods on your credit card within a 90-day period prior to the filing of your bankruptcy, and the amount of those luxury goods are more than $675, there's a presumption that those specific debts do not go away in your bankruptcy filing. So if you're needing to use your credit cards to buy items for Christmas or for the holidays or whatever you're using for at this point, with the idea that, hey, you know what, I'm going to need to file for bankruptcy early on next year due to pretty serious debt problems, this could cause you an issue if you're using your credit cards for luxury items. Now, something that the Bankruptcy Code does not provide us is a real clear definition of what luxury items are. Now, what it does say is that it's for basically as long as it's luxury items are not things that are reasonably necessary for your household. So if you're buying gas and groceries and diapers for the kids and those types of things, those are considered acceptable living expenses, and you're probably not going to have any type of problem when it comes to that. But if you are buying trips, cruises, jewelry, different things like that where they're big purchases that probably aren't necessary, that can end up causing you some problems. So when you're using your credit cards, if you're needing to use them over the holidays, you need to make sure that you use them wisely so that you don't run into any problems with that. Again, that's a $675 limit within a 90-day window prior to filing for bankruptcy. Now, there's also a very specific rule as it relates to cash advances off of credit cards. And that is if within the 70 days prior to the filing of your bankruptcy, you've taken out more than $950 in cash advances off of a credit card, those specific charges are deemed, or there's presumption that they can be deemed non-dischargeable, meaning they don't go away in your bankruptcy process. Now, so those are the 2 rules you need to think about if you're pulling cash off a credit card, if you're using the credit card right prior to filing or right prior to Christmas, and then you're needing to file bankruptcy later. It could become an issue in your case. Now, that's what the law says. Let me tell you what the reality is, what I see in most bankruptcy cases. And that is, one, the creditor themselves has to actually come into the bankruptcy and raise the issue. It's not like, if I'm filing for bankruptcy and within the 90-day window prior to filing, I went out and bought, $2,000 worth of things on my credit card. It's not like those $2,000 just automatically is not discharged in your bankruptcy case. The creditor actually has to come in and raise the issue. They have to object to those specific charges going away. And because of that, I can tell you in my career of 15 years in doing this and dealing with thousands of people through the bankruptcy process, I don't see it happening that often. And by not often, I mean I've seen it happen really less than 5 times in 15 years. And usually it's in cases where there is really some pretty extreme abuse of the system going on, where someone went out and just essentially went on a shopping spree within, right prior to filing for bankruptcy. Those things can cause issues. Like I said, if you're using your credit card because there's no gas to get to work, because there's no groceries, those things you're probably not going to have any type of problem with. And like I said, I haven't seen it be a very big issue. So I don't see it happening that often. And 2, they've got to actually come in and raise the issue for it to become a problem in your bankruptcy. That being the case, it's always my advice that once you make that decision to file for bankruptcy, I would not use your credit cards any further. I would get rid of them unless it's an absolute emergency. And like I said, you're not able to feed your family kind of thing or get to work. I would do everything I could not to incur any more debt, just because you don't want to run into any of those problems. So, with all that being said, that'll do it for this episode. Just wanted to do a quick little advice on credit cards without being, like I said, Debbie Downer on this. I hope you have a great holiday season. And if you do need to file for bankruptcy in the new year, I'm going to be giving a lot more tips and strategies and episodes on particularly bankruptcy filing and some of the things you need to consider if you're thinking of doing it at the beginning of a year, and how it can impact your case overall. Again, our sponsor for today's episode is the Consumer Warrior Project. You can learn more about that, and there's even some courses and tutorials on bankruptcy and really diving deep into the process as far as what you can expect and how it's going to impact things like your credit and your ability to loan money going forward. Again, that's at legal.coach. So that'll do it for today's episode, and I will catch you next time.